Ladies and gents, please welcome Mr. Steve Biegun and Ms. Kang In-sun.
Joining us from Washington, D.C. is the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, Stephen Biegun. Good evening, Mr. Secretary. Welcome to the Asian Leadership Conference. Deputy Secretary will make his remarks, and I will ask follow-up questions. I will turn it over to Deputy Secretary Biegun. Please go ahead.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much, and my warm appreciation to Chosun Ilbo for inviting me to join this conference this morning. It's a great honor for me to be at this event with so many old friends and colleagues, and I'm honored to join the distinguished lineup of speakers that you've arranged for this year's conference, especially including President George W. Bush, for whom I had the opportunity to serve in the White House, and it was an honor of a lifetime to do so. I also want to convey my best to Speaker of the National Assembly, Pak, to Prime Minister Chung, former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Indian Minister of External Affairs, Jai Shankar, Chosun Ilbo CEO, Mr. Bang. It's great to see you all and so many others. The participation of so many distinguished voices in this morning's event is a reflection of the importance of the Indo-Pacific region as we look forward to another century of global leadership. The COVID-19 pandemic, which has wreaked havoc across the globe, has also reaffirmed important values that we share as democracies. This pandemic has highlighted the importance of transparency and accountability within countries and within multilateral institutions in detecting, preventing, and countering global threats. Today, we're dealing with a global pandemic, but the future holds other novel challenges that will demand a coordinated global response. As we discuss global leadership in the world after coronavirus, the fundamental principles of democratic governance will be essential elements in strengthening institutions to be more resilient, more effective, and more relevant. As we look to the future of the United States and the Indo-Pacific, we should reflect on some of the most critical institutions the United States has built with our partners, the post-World War II Pacific Treaty Alliances. These alliances have contributed to our shared security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific for 7 decades. And while the United States' commitment to these alliances and their mutual defense obligations is ironclad, we also recognize that the post-World War II alliance structure, designed to address the challenges and threats of the Cold War, cannot endure without rejuvenation. To sustain the free and open order, our strategic relationships need to reflect the geopolitical realities of today and tomorrow. Much has changed over the past 70 years, and our own thinking must evolve as well. Our relationships with many of our global treaty allies have evolved to reflect the post-Cold War geopolitical realities and to meet new threats. These conversations have not always been easy, as we seek alignment on how best to equitably balance the costs while addressing strategic threats and new challenges. But frank discussion should be undertaken with the goal of strengthening and deepening these alliances in a manner that reflects our respective interests. This past summer, we commemorated the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of the Korean War. As a result of that war, the United States pledged to defend the Republic of Korea against outside aggression, and so we will. And over the years, that ironclad security commitment has blossomed into a multifaceted relationship that will permit the US-ROK alliance to evolve in ways to stay relevant, to promote our ideals and our values, and defend against shared threats well beyond the Korean Peninsula. Indeed, today we work together as allies far afield to advance democratic freedoms, human rights, public health, global economic development, and so much more. We collaborate to counter terrorism and violent extremism, to combat the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and to assist the victims of conflict and disaster worldwide. Much of this reflects the incredible increase in Korean capabilities that resulted from the post-war miracle on the Han River. The alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea is a natural one, based upon shared interests and deeply held values. But to ensure its relevance, we must work together to rejuvenate our cooperation, to meet the unexpected and expected challenges of tomorrow. A part of that continuing work together is to transform the relationship with North Korea, to realize a brighter and better future for all the people on the Korean Peninsula. I've touched upon the strategic landscape of the world and how it's different today, 67 years after our mutual security agreement was signed in 1953. I truly believe this changed landscape not only makes possible, but in fact demands from us a transformed diplomatic, security, and economic relationship with North Korea, one that serves all of our interests. As a global leader, the United States has empowered the peaceful growth of nations across the Indo-Pacific and around the globe. We have worked with these nations transparently on issues of mutual benefit and held ourselves to the same standards and rules as we expect of others. The United States stands for a pluralistic vision that will ensure our countries and all the region's diverse countries can thrive as sovereign and prosperous nations in a free and open Indo-Pacific. One might call this a vision of Pax Indo-Pacifica, a region at peace, protected, and made prosperous in equal measure by those who comprise the Indo-Pacific. This endeavor will not be easy. The current threats against our democratic institutions and freedoms will also continue and transform. The decisions we make today on calling out these threats to democracy and how we build institutions to respond to the next global crisis will have consequence for generations to come. And if we sustain our resolve to do so, I am certain that the US-ROK alliance provides us a solid foundation on which to build for those future crises and challenges. Together, the United States and the Republic of Korea are positioned to address shared challenges head-on while expanding a more peaceful and prosperous world for future generations to come. Thank you, and Ms. Kang, I'd be more than happy to answer questions from you or the audience.
Thank you for your great speech, Secretary. Well, the coronavirus is still spreading very fast in the United States, and then so you may be worried a lot about that. So how do you cope with it personally and nationally?
Well, the tale of the coronavirus is one that actually has brought the U.S. and the Republic of Korea even closer over the course of the past year. In fact, in the early days of the pandemic, it was our close friends in South Korea who had been hit most severely with a rapid outbreak. And we found together a pathway to cooperation that has been sustained to the current day.
Right.
During the darkest days of COVID-19, I and my counterpart from the ROK Foreign Ministry held a weekly conference call with friends and partners across the Indo-Pacific. Every Thursday evening, late here in Washington, D.C., we'd sit together and compare notes, talk about how we could repatriate our citizens, keep our borders open to essential trade and travel, how we could collaborate on the distribution of essential personal protective equipment, and later how we could work together on therapeutics, and even today, how we could work together on the development and distribution of vaccines. So while there are many challenges and many tragedies from COVID-19, including the loss of many too many citizens of the United States and the Republic of Korea, we've also found in this relationship a partnership in which we can work together. I can tell you that when we were facing our first wave of the virus in April, we had we were all still very much trying to understand the nature of the virus and how it spreads. And the first trustworthy and reliable set of data that the United States received in order to formulate its strategy to turn back that first wave of COVID-19 came from our friends and ally in South Korea. The Republic of Korea did such a tremendous job of collecting data on tracking and tracing and analyzing the behavior of the virus that it materially helped the United States in developing our own strategy, which we deployed early in the summer. As you say, we're facing a very difficult second wave. Our citizens are holding up well under the pressure of it. And of course, we all look forward to the moment in which we'll have the widespread distribution of vaccine. But until then, we're going to have to be careful. We're going to have to listen closely to our health authorities. We're going to have to do everything on an individual and society basis to turn back the spread of the virus.
Yeah, now the U.S. presidential election is over and we are in a transition period. And when you think of U.S.-ROK alliance, what do you think is the most important challenges ahead of us in the next few days, I mean, like at 70 days?
So I've had an opportunity to discuss these very issues at length with my counterparts in the Republic of Korea, even over the last few weeks. In fact, even in the midst of COVID-19, I've seen more of my South Korean counterparts and South Korean officials than from any country around the world. And we've spoken at length about this and talked about what the United States and the Republic of Korea can do going forward in order to put the alliance on a future-oriented path. First of all, let me say the alliance is still quite strong.
Yep.
The contributions of both countries are significant. The seriousness with which we undertake the activity of the alliance are without interruption. But we also are challenged almost 70 years, more than 70 years
Yeah.
After that alliance was agreed to, on how we advance it into the next generation. And I think that's very much on the minds of Koreans as well as Americans. And it's what was at the center of my remarks this evening. We need to rejuvenate the alliance. We need to look at the alliance and see how it can serve the interests and the purposes that both the Republic of Korea and the United States seek. Obviously, the alliance has a very important mission on the Korean Peninsula, but the alliance is not sustainable over a long period of time if it simply has the United States protecting 50 million South Koreans from 25 million North Koreans. The opportunities for cooperation and coordination that we're already exploring around the world make tremendous sense for both of our countries, and it's one that we should explore in depth as we seek to evolve security structures across the Indo-Pacific.
If you could give just one advice for your successor who will deal with the U.S.-ROK alliance, what would it be?
Trust our allies.
Yeah.
I have found, without exception, that my counterparts in the Republic of Korea have been worthy of complete trust. And you need that. If we're going to have an alliance where we are essentially committing to each other's defense, it has to be built upon the basis of trust. I'm sure that anybody sitting in my chair in the future will come to this job with far more knowledge and relationships in the Republic of Korea than I certainly had when I started my job 2.5 years ago as the special representative for North Korea. But developing that trust has really helped us find a way forward together, and I'm sure that that's the essential element.
President Trump has 70 days left in his office, and he's not conventional president. So, do you think he may try something to make his historic legacy in North Korea policy?
So every president is president all the way through their term or terms, and the exception is, and there's no exception with President Trump. President Trump remains open to the possibilities of diplomacy in many parts of the world, including with the DPRK. Of course, we have had a similar view over the course of many months, and even the past 2.5 years since the Singapore summit happened, that we were prepared to engage. Sustaining that engagement at a senior level, having empowered interlocutors on the North Korean side in order to join us in that discussion has been the challenge. Of course, we will consider any opportunities, but at the same time, I think as our electoral process and our constitutional processes continue to play out here in the United States, I expect that many partners around the world will remain somewhat guarded from plunging too deeply into diplomatic initiatives. But President Trump has made it clear since the Singapore summit that he's prepared to engage.
I see. Yeah. Under this volatile situation after U.S. election, there are experts who shows concerns over the possible provocation of North Korea, such as ICBM and nuclear tests. How do you assess the current situation on Korean Peninsula?
So obviously, we can't entirely control the choices or decisions made by the DPRK. We can only really make the decisions for ourselves. But we can do so working closely, first of all, with our close friends and partners in the Republic of Korea. Just yesterday evening, I hosted my counterpart, Ambassador Lee Da-hoon, with whom I've worked very closely over the course of the past 2 years on our North Korea diplomacy. We operate from a principle of no surprises. We've been able to develop a strategy together that will meet both the interests of the Republic of Korea and the United States of America. But our strategy also extends to North Korea. In 2017, when President Trump took office, he inherited a relationship that was deeply troubled, and in fact headed toward a crisis, and it nearly reached a crisis over the course of that year. But through some deft diplomacy, including some very strong leadership by the President of the Republic of Korea, we were able to unwind those tensions and move towards the summit in Singapore, which set in motion a sustained period of negotiation between our two countries. I think it would be most unfortunate and ill-advised for any provocation to be used at this current moment in order to try to shape the positions of the United States government in the future. And I'm confident that if the Democratic People's Republic of Korea chooses to remain engaged with the United States going forward, I'm confident that they will find a willing partner here in the United States. That's the message we have sent consistently, and I hope that message is registered in Pyongyang as they look forward to the weeks and months ahead.
When you look back upon your more than 2 years of your work with North Korea, when was the most regrettable moment?
I have no regrets about any particular moment. I found the North Koreans, when we were engaged directly with them, to be at virtually all times constructive. There was never acrimonious discussion behind closed doors in our meetings, whether it was in Panmunjom Village in Pyongyang, here in Washington, D.C., in Stockholm, Sweden, and in places that have never been disclosed, where we met and worked with the North Koreans over the past 2 years. I think that the biggest challenge we faced is that the government of North Korea, really the leader of North Korea, has to make a choice. But if North Korea's choice is to engage with the United States and the Republic of Korea and work together to develop a brighter future for all the people of the Korean Peninsula, I think that the North Koreans will very much find partners in both the United States and the Republic of Korea.
What was it like to work with North Korea? I think it must be a little bit different from what you have expected before you are taking that job.
I was asked this question once before, shortly after the Hanoi summit. And I'd never really pondered it because, of course, it's different. And the strictures on our counterparts in North Korea are different. The consequences for outcomes that are unsatisfying to the leadership are significantly different between our two countries. But at the end of the day, you know what my fundamental judgment was about working with people from North Korea is they're just people. They're human beings. Their system is different. They're inside a different set of strictures, but they're human beings. And I always felt that even when the positions were far apart and the gaps were wide at many points, including at the Hanoi summit, but even then there was an element of humanity in our interlocutors, and I think that is a hopeful sign of what is possible going forward. I don't know how much time, how much longer I'll be on this job, but I think there are certain things that I found that are enduring, and I think that whoever is next to negotiate with the North Koreans, I'm sure that they're going to find very much the same thing I did.
Does it mean that based on your experience with working with North Korea and of course Kim Jong-un, and do you still believe that you could negotiate with them to get something out of that, like progress in denuclearization?
Well, certainly that's our goal, and I wouldn't for a moment suggest that I'm at all satisfied with the progress that we've made so far. But a lot of what we've been doing over the last couple of years is building the foundation for what's to come. I think that we need the sustained engagement. We need to move in parallel towards denuclearization, as well as towards finding a permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. We have to work to transform the relationship between our countries and address the issues that could provide a brighter future for the Korean people. All this needs to move forward, as I've said many times in the past, simultaneously and in parallel. We're not asking North Korea to do everything before we do anything, but we are saying that as we walk down this path, we need to see progress in all the areas that are important to both countries. I think it's possible. I think this problem is solvable, but we're trying to solve a problem that's nearly 7 decades in the making, and it's not going to happen overnight. Even testing the approach with the direct intervention and contact between the leaders of the two countries, it's not going to happen overnight. And so we're going to need to have a sustained effort. And that's the one thing that I would appeal to our counterparts in North Korea, is to sustain the effort. It's not going to be solved overnight. We're not going to find an answer to all the complex issues that have built up over the decades. We're not going to build trust in the course of a weekend. But if we stick with it, I am confident that this is a solvable challenge. And it's the reason why, even to this day, I remain committed to that mission.
We are running out of time, so if it could be, this is my last question. What is your advice for President-elect Biden on North Korea policy?
So I will have ample opportunity to share advice with whoever is my successor, and I'm not going to presume to give anybody else advice in public on how they should proceed, one way or the other. When I finish my time in government, which will be finished regardless of other circumstances. I am confident that there are competent people in the State Department and across the United States government who are more than capable of fulfilling this mission. Of course, there are many challenges, and there's so much history to this. You feel the weight of history when you're working on this and trying to untie knots that were tied so many decades ago. But with the things I've said this evening, with the confident approach that working in trust with our friends and allies in South Korea, and looking at North Korea, and looking at the North Koreans as human beings, I think we can progress on this. I truly do, and I hope to see in the not too distant future real progress in the steps that we've been trying to take.
And one more last question. What would you like to say to Kim Jong-un? Your message to Kim Jong-un right now. Yeah,
it's not my place to send messages to Kim Jong-un. He's received his messages from the President of the United States.
But if you could.
The President has extended a confidence and a trust that if the North Koreans work together with us, that we will be able to make progress on these issues. My message is to my counterparts, which is more appropriate, that I wish them well. I encourage them to remain committed to the job that we began together. And if they do, I truly believe that there's a brighter future for all the people on the Korean Peninsula.
I see. I guess you may miss Korean chicken soup, right?
I'll be having Korean chicken soup before the year is out. Trust me.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mari. But thank you very much again for hosting me this evening. I apologize, regret, I should say, that it has to happen under these circumstances. I very much wanted to be there in person, and I certainly look forward to a future engagement with Cho Sun-il-bo at your conferences if you're kind enough to invite me. Thank you very much for having me this evening.
Okay, thank you for being with us. Thanks a lot.